Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are having a fantastic day. If you're new to the channel, my name is Parker Nierenstein, and this is Vehicle Virgins. I have owned my 2020 Toyota Supra for the last month and a half, and in that month and a half, I've put 1,300 incredible miles on the car. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect when I initially got the car, but it has exceeded my expectations in pretty much every single way. It's a downright blast to drive. It sounds impressively good. It's easy to modify, and honestly, it just puts a smile on my face every time I'm behind the wheel, and honestly, that's the point of cars, is it not? But of course, no car is perfect, and there are some things that I don't like about the Supra. So in today's video, we're gonna highlight some things that are, well, just kind of annoying about the car. Now, overall, I highly recommend getting one of these. If you're on the fence about it, pull the trigger. But there are some things that I think Toyota could have improved. The first thing I don't like about the Supra has to do with the trunk. Now, it can actually store a lot of space, but it's the first car that I've ever owned in this style that the rear opening trunk doesn't have any sort of exterior release whatsoever. So if you've got your phone in your pocket or your friends outside of the car, there's no way to open the trunk. The only way to do it is either the button in the interior or the button on the key. Normally you'd expect some sort of button, whether it's down here, or perhaps they could have had a button for the actual Toyota logo itself to pop the trunk, but they don't have one at all. Especially if your hands are full and your key is in your pocket. Lots of cars, especially at a $57,000 price point, might have some sort of sensor that you can kick your foot to pop the trunk, or at least something you can touch, but otherwise, you're kind of hosed. I will say though, it does have lots of room for a two-door car. The next thing I hate is the overusage of fake vents. This gets talked about a lot. The Supra is a high-performance car. There's no reason to have a whole bunch of almost Pep Boy-esque vents all over the car that don't actually do anything. So let's go ahead and go throughout the car and count how many fake vents there are, and why couldn't they have just opened them up in the first place? Looking at the front of the car now, we can immediately see a fake vent here for perhaps brake cooling, but doesn't do anything because it's plastic. Then we've got the same thing on the other side. Then come up to the hood, we've got heat extraction vents for the engine, perhaps reducing turbulence for the wheel wells, but of course that would be on a supercar. This doesn't have real vents whatsoever. Unfortunately, it is plastic once again. I don't see why they couldn't have just cut out that hole for actual functionality. Then we've got another vent on the side here, kind of got that wide body style, but there's no real reason to have that fake vent. Then come around to the rear of the car, we've got another fake vent right there, another one here, and then of course the same on the side. All right, let's move on. The interior of the Supra. I'll be honest, the interior of this car is pretty awesome. It has borrowed a lot of stuff from BMW, but that is a good thing. It also offers some options in the interior that stuff like a BMW M2 doesn't get, like a heads-up display. We also have lane keep assist that steers the car slightly in the lanes to make sure you don't veer out on the highway. But one thing I'm really disappointed about in the interior of the car is the speaker system. So the base model car comes with a 10-speaker speaker system. This is the premium model, so it comes with a JBL upgraded 12-speaker 500-watt system that supposedly is supposed to sound good. Unfortunately though, even with the bass turned all the way up, you know how in cars you can go into the settings, change the tone, there's no bass whatsoever. The speakers don't get very loud, and honestly, I'm really underwhelmed. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that the subwoofers look like they are Pep Boy special wheel covers and not actual subs. I mean, obviously they are, but they look so weird. The next thing I hate about the Supra's interior has to do with the wireless charging port and the configuration of the cigarette lighter. Now, pretty much every single time I'm driving a sports car, I drive with a radar detector to protect myself. Seriously, I highly recommend getting a radar detector if you don't have one already. So we've got my radar plugged in up here and then into the cigarette lighter port right here. The issue is, now it makes it nearly impossible to slide your phone into the wireless charging port, which is right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out my phone. And because it is the max version of an iPhone, the bigger one, it doesn't fit in when that's plugged in, but two, even if you remove this, it barely fits in. And after some struggling, there we go, now it's finally charging. But you had to have removed this and then put it back in order to get your phone in there. They could have just moved the cigarette port, maybe over to the side, under here, somewhere else. Obviously, I can, of course, hardwire my radar detector into the car, but most people don't do that, and well, just seems too cluttered right here. I will say though, the carbon fiber accents in the interior are really, really nice. And the leather quality of the seats and the steering wheel, and honestly, the entire interior quality is awesome in the new Supra. Minus this right here. One of the most important components of a sports car is a good steering wheel. It's what you have your hands on, it's what you are controlling the vehicle with. So having one that looks good, has the right functionality, isn't too cluttered with buttons, and gives you control of the road is important. In the Supra, well, it does a couple of those things, but not all of them. In terms of the overall design, honestly, it's a little bit lackluster. It seems like something in maybe like a Camry Sport instead of an actual sports car. Now, we do have paddles mounted behind the steering wheel, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but the overall shape of it is just a little bit underwhelming, and honestly, it's just too thin. If it was a little bit beefier, I'm gonna replace the steering wheel eventually, same with the seats and probably most of the interior of the car, but if it was a little thicker and sportier, I would appreciate it. Now it's time to get behind the wheel of the Supra and talk about one thing that was probably the least thought out part of the entire design process of the Supra, and it honestly kind of blows my mind how they didn't catch this before the car went into production. Now guys, I know I'm being super critical of the car. I'm just trying to point out all of the flaws that I have found out. I still do love this thing. One thing I do like when firing it up is if you put the car into accessory power, you can turn it into sport mode, which pops up on the dash here before you actually start the car. Then we'll go ahead and start it up. That BMW blong noise. Oh, but listen to the sound of this thing. It has such a beefy tone to it. It's not thin, it just has this satisfying, just grunt to it. Man, I don't know what it is. Every single person that's been in this car and heard it, including basically all of my friends have BMW M2s, are convinced, and I agree, that this car sounds better than an M2. Not the M2 competition, because they basically ruined the sound with that car, but the M2 in general. Something to do with the exhaust on the car and Toyota's tuning of the B58 engine. Whew, it sounds good. Let's take it for a spin. In the canyons now, in the Toyota Supra, where it's at home. This thing is so playful. So there is one part about the Supra that I actually don't know how it made it through development and testing without somebody catching. And that has to do with when you roll the windows all the way down. Now, I'll be completely honest. I actually usually drive with my car's windows up, especially when I'm driving in a sporty fashion. If you were to roll in a really bad accident, having the windows up so your head can, that is a new C8 Corvette. Damn, I have not seen the new C8. That is actually sick. So I'll be honest, when I drive quickly, I keep the windows up. If you were to get into a horrible accident and roll, having a window there so your head can bounce off and back into the interior is a lot better than having your head go out the window and getting decapitated when the car rolls. That being said, pretty much all of my friends rock with the windows down at all times. So immediately, when they got in the car for the first time, riding in the car or driving it, they rolled down the windows. Now in this car, I'm actually gonna roll them up because it's already starting to do it. It has the most window buffeting noise of any car I have ever driven. You know the feeling and the sound, it's a disgusting sound. When you're driving a sedan or an SUV and just the back windows are down and it creates this chopping noise that hurts your ear. Well, after about 45, 50 miles an hour in the Supra, with the windows down, it does that. And it's not the rear windows, it's just the front ones. Every other two-door I've ever owned did not create wind noise like that. It's actually kind of frustrating because essentially if you're going on a quick mob and you're going over 50 miles an hour, you pretty much can't have the windows all the way down. You can crack them a little bit, but I don't get why they didn't do something aerodynamically or on the outside of the car, perhaps the shape of the inside of the car, to remedy that, because well, not being able to put down your windows at high speeds is pretty annoying. All right, the next thing I hate about the Supra, and it's probably the most obvious one, is the incessant commentary about how this is not a real Supra and it's a crime that BMW collaborated with them on the project, and you know what, the car is just complete garbage, it doesn't have a 2JZ and it doesn't have a wing and it's not a Toyota and it's just complete shit. This car is such a good car in its own right, and I understand people's gripes with the fact that they did borrow some stuff from BMW. And I understand people being heated about it for a couple weeks after the articles and after the launch of the car. But this incessant, man, that Corvette is sick. But this, oh my God, the new C8 is so sick. I think they're doing, I don't know what magazine that is. It looks like Motor Trend, potentially. I just lost my train of thought. The new C8 is freaking badass. But if you get over the fact that yes, it has a B58 BMW engine in it, which is an incredible engine that can make serious horsepower without any sort of internal upgraded modifications needed. I mean, my car with just a tune and downpipes is now making over 450 horsepower, and then with an upgraded turbo, I mean, basically for $5,000 to $6,000, you could have a 600 horsepower plus Supra, 600 to the wheels, and it's hard to get that level of power for the money in many cars. So in terms of that, it's an awesome platform. And the other thing is, without BMW's help, it's possible we wouldn't have seen a Supra at all, and not for a long time, that's for sure. It helped cut serious costs in the development of creating a new engine. I mean, Toyota doesn't have the peppy sports car engine capable for a car like this, for going in a Supra, nor do they have a transmission that's good enough for it. So that type of collaboration has allowed this car, in my eyes, to be better. So incessantly dealing with all the commentary about, to BMW Z4, honestly, it gets a little bit annoying. And the last thing I hate about the Toyota Supra is the transmission. Now, I don't hate it, I just think it could be a lot better. It's an 8-speed automatic transmission that around town is unbelievably smooth. It just cruises along, shifts gears seamlessly. But when you're driving the car really hard, it's got a couple of lackluster components. One is the downshift. So you can't put this car fully into manual mode where it doesn't upshift on its own. You just bump the stock over to the left, that puts it into manual. I'm in sport mode right now, and you're gonna get the best acceleration, especially with a tuned car with traction control off, so we've got traction control off. But the problem is, sometimes you wanna flick a downshift into a corner, and it has so much safety built into it that a lot of times, I'm gonna flick a downshift right now, denied, flick a downshift, denied, denied, denied. There we go, it finally went. I just don't get that, especially when you compare it to something like a BMW M2 with the double clutch. That's never gonna happen whatsoever. And then the second component of the transmission is, under full throttle acceleration, if you accidentally get too close to the rev limiter, it makes the shift take a very long period of time. So I'll demonstrate what I mean by that. It's got a very like spongy rev limiter where it like holds the car there and then pauses and is like, oh, what have you done? And then lets the car go. You basically have to shift early, which if you look at the horsepower and torque curve, especially for a tuned car, kind of makes sense to upshift a little bit early to stay in the power band more, but that's basically the only way to have super quick gear shifts. Otherwise, when you floor it, did you hear that little brake? It was like, pause, it just has this delay to it that I don't understand. But if you upshift early, watch. Still a little bit of delay. So anyways, I wish the transmission shifted faster. Possibly some transmission tuning could fix that. And of course, I mean, the availability of a manual would have been really nice. We all know that having a manual in the car would be awesome. I'm actually meeting with the company that's doing manual swaps at SEMA to talk about potentially doing a manual swap in this car. So it should be pretty cool. Well, there you guys have it. I hope you enjoyed this video about the things that I don't like on my new 2020 Toyota Supra. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I think I'm gonna go get the Ferrari and go chase after that C8 because I love that thing. See you next video.